Hey, listeners, it's Kristin. One quick thing before we start this episode. That is the full advisor coaching community. Are you signed up? It's free and a simple way to stay up to date on how to keep your professional momentum while enjoying your personal life along the way. You'll get regular emails from me, not too many, but I'll keep you in the loop on strategies that are working now, tactics worth trying, upcoming podcast episodes, free live training events, and I'll let you know what I'm reading and listening to. Plus, you'll be the first to know when I open new coaching programs and workshops to help you grow. I just need your name and email address so I can keep you in the loop. Go to fulladvisorcoaching.com/resources and look for that bright green box. Enter your name and email and you're in. Again, just go to fulladvisorcoaching.com/resources. Now on with the show.
Hello and welcome to the Full Advisor Coaching Podcast with your host, Kristin Harad. Kristin, good to see you again. You're in a different place than the last time I saw you. All good or?
Yes, I know, Bill. Good to see you. Yes, we just moved. So, there's boxes and we still haven't figured out the lay of the land quite yet. So the podcast must go on though. So we carry on anyway, right?
We do indeed. And I fortunately have worked with you long enough to know your room may be a little bit disorganized, but I know your mind is firmly with us. What have we got on the table today? What are we talking about?
Well, you know what's exciting today is we're going into an area we haven't touched yet on the Full Advisor Coaching Podcast, even after recording more than 20 episodes now. We're coming up, we've had about our year anniversary, and we may have by the time this comes out, but we're going to be getting into the world of operations. So, as we keep talking about advisors who are forming version 2.0 of their RAA and they're like looking ahead on their growth goals, you can get out there, do the business development, get things going, but ultimately you got to make sure things behind the scenes are running as well. And luckily, our guest today is going to shed some light on that for us. So I'm excited today because I'm welcoming Cameo Roberson. And Cameo is the founder of Atlas Park Consulting. And she is here to shed her expertise on how to take operational challenges and turn them into seven-figure growth. If you haven't yet met Cameo, and today is the first day I've met her in person, I've been a follower from afar, as she has been spreading her knowledge across the industry. But over the last 6 years, her superpowers have assisted more than 85 advisory firms to help them generate more than $100,000 in new revenue or cost savings within the first year working with her. So, Cameo, it is great to have you here. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Kristin, for having me here. I'm looking forward to this dynamic conversation around operations.
Yes. You know, what's exciting for me is that we both kind of work with the same type of advisor, which is, the person who's running a firm and who's really excited about being an entrepreneur, right? And, I'm sure like you and I both, we both were like drawn into being entrepreneurs because, hey, the freedom, the fulfillment, all of the things like, yes, I'm going to be in charge of my own life. And, you can quickly see, I'm sure even you have seen, even being an operational expert, that it's easy to get into a place of working all the time, right? And really letting the business drive you instead of saying, okay, all right, as we grow, let me take a step back and look at the business and see what do I need to do. So what are you noticing among your clients? What's their pain when they come to you?
Great question. One of the biggest pain points that I see with a lot of independent advisors that I work with is they're so passionate around working with clients and delivering that high level of service that they often forget the behind the scenes infrastructure needed to support that high level of service. And honestly, Kristin, a lot of advisors are winging it every day. And as you continue to grow your practice and add on to your client base, wing it, you don't want to be in that space very long because it's overwhelming.
It is. And you're kind of just holding your breath and kind of taping things together and hoping that it stays, it holds, right? As
Right.
you bring more people in and you're like, we'll get to it, we'll get to it, we'll get to it. And I imagine that's something like, well, once we grow this much more, then we will get to that.
Absolutely. And a lot of times, advisors will have a Frankenstein style business where it's just piecemeal patchwork. And at some point, the patches start to fall off.
Ah, yes, I imagine that is absolutely the case. And I've seen it, right? I've heard, I mean, I've had confessions from founders, right? Or confessions from the leaders where they're like, okay, yes, we've kind of patched it together. At some point, we need to step back and look at the whole system. So when do you usually come into the come into the scene? When is kind of the best time for an advisor to go, I got to reach out to Cameo and get her team's help?
Yeah, so the best time is really a step back and looking at the advisor themselves and really identifying where they are in their business growth path, right? So we work with all types of advisors. We work with solo advisors who are looking for systems. We work with transitioning advisors who are looking to really build out their tech stack and get everything coordinated, as well as exiting advisors looking to maximize firm value, and then some M&A activity as well when you're buying a business and you've got to take the happy family of your practice and merge it into two new other practices or vice versa. And so an advisor who is in either one of those buckets and says, you know what, our operations is not really seamless. We're having challenges around team communication. Our workflows aren't really working for us. Or maybe even I've had instances where a prospective client has told an advisor, you know what, you're great, but we really don't understand how you work. So we're going to pass on working
Mm.
with you.
Oh,
These
yes,
are all
yes.
examples of when an advisory practice should say, you know what, I think I should reach out to Cameo at Atlas Park and really get an audit of my operations to see, how we can fix things.
Oh, that's great. You know, that actually goes hand in hand with something I teach in the business development side of things, which is make sure and your clients or your prospective clients, so when you're in the prospect experience, that you can show them what they're going to, how it's going to work, especially in that first 90 days to 1 year, where it's like you finally, here's someone who had to build trust with you. They had to get to know you. Maybe they've never worked with an advisor before, probably, right? A lot of the people out there, like it's their first time and they finally make the leap to hire you. And then they're kind of going, well, so now what? And you haven't really, if you haven't explained it and showed it and said, hey, this is what's going to happen. We're going to have this account move here and this happen here. And you're going to log into this system and do this. Then the trust starts to get a little tenuous, right?
Yes,
From the beginning, when you're like, okay, we should be using this onboarding process, right? This onboarding time frame to really solidify and make someone feel very confident in your ability to handle essentially the life savings of the person, right?
absolutely. And recognizing that trust is solidified, as you mentioned, and really strengthened when you think about where your prospect or where your client is in their journey in working with you. And oftentimes I see advisors wanting to differentiate themselves on their fees alone. That's important. But what's beyond the fees? Where is your true value proposition that's going to reinforce that client's decision to work with you beyond the fees? And it's really thinking about those strategic touch points in the very beginning, that heavy lift, which is usually the first year. What happens year 2, year 3? And then what are you capturing on the front end to support that? So you don't have to keep going back to the client and asking for these little details, but you've already thought about it. And you look like a rock star because you're taking care of them at every juncture.
Oh, that's great. Do you have an example of something people might forget to look at or ask about in the early stages where you have to go back then and be like, okay, oh, I forgot to ask. What about this?
Yeah, so a really big one is asking about any special milestones coming up in your prospective client's life, whether it's graduation of a child or a grandchild, or even the birth of a first child or grandchild. These special milestone moments that could be coming up in the next 12 months, having a conversation around those things that are coming up so that you can plan for them and you don't have to go back and ask the clients again is a great example of capturing that on the front end. And then even things like if you are still meeting with clients in person and you are maybe serving them beverages, asking them what's their favorite beverage. Little details like that
Right.
really pay dividends in the end, because they'll say, well, how did you know this? And they're, don't necessarily realize that they gave you that information on the front end, but you were smart enough to capture it and then have it in your CRM so that when that client meeting comes up, you're delivering and you look like a rock star.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I'm going to pivot a tiny bit just based on something you said there. You mentioned the CRM. Now I know that CRMs can be, there's no one solution there that's like, this is absolutely hands down the best one, right? But how is it that you help a firm leader who's practiced in kind of, like you said, Frankenstein, the various tech platforms, and they're moving things together? How is it that you help them evaluate, are they in a good spot, or is it time to make a change? And how do you guide them through that? Because I have seen that as a big stumbling block for advisors.
What I often do is I will audit their systems and audit how they're leveraging their technology. Before making a recommendation to go out and buy another CRM, is let's understand how you're currently using the tool as is now. Okay. I then take it a step further and I want to talk to the team because they're the one in the trenches often leveraging the CRM. And so let me best understand how they're using the tool. From there, we can then come up with a set of recommendations, their business model, how they want to grow, and then what aspects of the CRM are that they're currently not using that we can build out. And that approach has been really helpful for the team to understand the missing pieces, the gaps, and then a plan to build out the tool if they want to continue to stay with it.
Oh, that's great. Yes, I imagine that is quite a heavy lift for you coming in there. And then I think asking the team is really, we've talked about that in a former episode, just around client experience and marketing overall. Like, make sure you're checking in with team members around the reality of things, because, ultimately you may think it's all one way, but really the people who are there day to day handling client issues.
Yeah, the biggest part of that is the reality, as you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. Like looking to see what makes sense there. So I know one thing you talk about is having duplication. Talk about this in terms of and correct me if I'm wrong, but that we want to have like the founder or the leadership team looking to see how they can replicate themselves in key areas of the business. Can you speak to that? Because I thought that was pretty interesting. And I was like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, it's one of those layered conversations, right? Because when a business owner first starts out, especially you think of a solo practitioner who could be listening now, you're wearing all the hats. You're doing everything in your business. And you're trying to figure out how to structure your day-to-day, how to make sure all the important things get done. How do you then move from you doing everything yourself to having a very clear delegation plan and ultimately duplicating yourself in certain areas? For example, if you're currently doing all of your sales and marketing, that may be a portion of your business that you actually want to outsource to someone else or bring in someone in-house to take care of it. In order for you to do that effectively, you really need to figure out the end-to-end process steps that should be happening across your sales and marketing. You don't want to necessarily let someone else define that for you. Figure out what your core systems that you're using now that are working, get those pieces documented, and then hire an expert to come in and actually manage that component for you. That's an area where you can duplicate yourself over the sales and marketing piece, delegate and or outsource it.
Yeah, and I think that would be useful for as you're growing, as you're adding like lead advisors who are coming in and they're, if they're in charge of their own business development in some way, or they want to be a contributor to the firm growth in that way. And it also takes the onus off of a single rainmaker, I would think. Like, if we have a rainmaker who ultimately, I see this frequently in the sort of the version 2.0 world, is that the rainmaker who kind of got the business where it is looking to exit, right? And then the next generation's coming in and they're like, okay, what should I do, or how do I do this, and what are the best practices, and do we need to change them, as it may not be the same way now, like the way it was built may not be the way we grow from here. And
Absolutely.
I imagine that comes up. I see that coming up a lot on the sales and marketing side, for sure.
Yeah, it does. And if the owner has documented what they've done up to this point and found things that really, really worked well, then you can also use that for training of those new advisors coming on board, and then figure out, are there things that we need to adjust or pivot? But there's a framework in place that you can teach to those incoming advisors to then duplicate what you've been doing. And I think it's a great way to incentivize your team, because they're coming into an established process that works.
Can you say more about that, on how you would incentivize them? Like, what would you advise there?
Well, in that instance, you have a newer advisor coming on the team and they now have rainmaking responsibilities. If you teach them what you've been able to do and been successful at, you're then setting them up for success. They don't have to come in and try to figure it out all on their own. When people are given process steps and given training in order for them to perform their jobs well, that then increases their confidence. And when people are successful, it then increases their ability to perform well and also feel good about what they're doing. When we are left to our own devices, people make things up constantly, right? It's human nature to do that. But if you teach your people, same with the client service component, if you teach them how to serve your clients, how to go out and get new business, you're teaching them to be an asset in the firm. And when they show up and perform well, then the positive reinforcements from the leaders should naturally come, and people feel good that they're showing up in the right way. When you set your people up for success, whether it's an associate advisor coming on with business development or rainmaking responsibilities, or client support professionals, you're the leader and they're going to be looking to you for direction. So the more training and direction that you can provide them, you really give them an opportunity to be set up for success. One of the things that I see in the industry, and I know you see this too, Kristin, is there's a lot of turnover. And I believe the turnover has to do with, in some instances, the culture just not being the best fit or right. But we don't always set our people up for success. And they come into jobs, they come into responsibilities, and I say, okay, now go and do your job. And they're like, wait, right. I don't get any training. I don't get any direction. Yeah. There's no, metrics or milestones set up for me. And people just kind of wing it. And you wonder why, a lot of our people aren't successful. It's because we're not giving them clear instruction on how to be successful.
And I think that's the difference, because the founder or the person in charge is more entrepreneurial usually, so they're more comfortable making things up. But as you grow and add, and you want to become, a much larger firm and add, hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue every year and keep going, ultimately, the people you're hiring want to be employed somewhere and have some structure and a framework and know what they need to do and what are their responsibilities and what is their role. And you as the leader are in the position where, okay, well, that may not be your personality or how you handle things. It's time to kind of step into that role, right? And be like, all right, now I need to take all of my knowledge and document that. And a question I was thinking about as you were talking about just the rainmaker and sales and marketing and even client service is, how do you recommend, I know the idea of, just document what you do comes up. What are the mechanics or specifics on, if I am a leader who's like, okay, I've been doing this for, a couple decades and I have ways that I approach sales and marketing. how literally should they get that documentation down? Is there a tool you recommend, a process, or a method?
Yeah, it's more of a process and a method, right? At the
Okay.
50,000 foot level is really understanding where you are and then what do you currently have in terms of systems. If you're looking to scale your practice, then the more
Mhm.
documentation you have around what you do is really going to support that. And so we will come in and really help leaders extract the knowledge from their business and across their
Mhm.
teams and get it into a strategy document so that they can see it. And then we can very clearly understand where the gaps are. From there, we can then pull in the right technology pieces to then support whatever needs to be built out. And what that does is it gives a big picture across the organization. And I really break it down into kind of 5 departments is your sales and marketing department, finance, client service, and then human capital or teams. And each one of those has systems and processes that should be built out if you want to continue to scale your business.
Okay. And so do you come in and help a founder or a leader of a firm go through that process and start to document what they do and what's successful? Or are they kind of in a situation where, they're left to their own devices to figure that out? I'm assuming, and I'm hoping that you come in and like, if I were running an RAA at that situation, I'd be like, all right, I want to document this. I see the value, but I know I'm never going to just sit down and do it myself.
Exactly. Yes. And so we absolutely will come in and help the leaders extract the knowledge and then do the documentation. Quick case study, a person team in Southern California came to us and said, hey, Cameo, we want to get more efficient. We want to have better use of our time. We want to really have clarity around our service model. And so I came in and did a full audit of the practice, talked with all the team members, came up with a recommendations report across the entire organization of this is what needs to be fixed. This is why. And then here's the service metric or the metric that's going to be affected by making this change. What that document did is outline all the pieces that we were then going to be able to work on. One of the biggest things was documenting their client onboarding workflows because they didn't have any. They were using Redtail and they just didn't have any workflow. So that was the first thing that we worked on. So the strategy around the client onboarding workflows is what we helped with, talk with all the team members involved and really get their process into a strategy document. From there, we'll then bring in one of our CRM specialists to actually translate what's on that strategy document into the CRM of choice. So it's an end-to-end solution. We do the strategy on the front end. I never tell people to start tinkering in the tech because until you get full visibility of your client journey, you're going to miss something and you're going to have workflows that you think are good, but you've missed steps because you're going to be mad because you didn't think about it outside of the tech first.
Yes, I love tinkering in the tech. That's a great phrase to be like, stop tinkering in the tech. Let us handle it.
Right.
Yeah, that I imagine is like, no, we will fix it with a tech solution. And then it's like, okay, either the leader's like, no, I saw this presentation. This is a great solution. We're going to use it. And then the team's like, that makes no sense. Or that's great, but that's not how we do things, and I imagine that is absolutely the case. Do you see, are there areas of like tools or technology that advisors are starting to add in that maybe 5-10 years ago they weren't using it? And you're like, okay, I mean, I'm thinking in the realm of even using AI or other areas. What are you seeing in that arena?
Yeah, I am seeing a lot more advisors adopting AI tools for note-taking in particular in their meetings. You think about, there's a lot of activity that happens in the client meetings. And if the advisor doesn't have someone to take notes, or if they're not taking notes, but then they're also trying to run the meeting at the same time, who's capturing those after the meeting steps? And so leveraging tools, transcription tools, AI in particular, to capture those steps is great. And then a lot of the platforms now will have integrations into different CRM tools as well to actually extract the takeaways and create tasks in your CRM for.
That's even better.
Oh, it is. It's not perfect.
Yeah. No. And I use a note taker. I've tried a few. You go back and you look and like, that's interesting. I didn't have that conversation, but most of the time it's very good. But I think it'll only get better, and I think it'll be quickly getting better, right? Like just exponentially getting better. But the translation of that into a task in the system and having that is like, as someone who is horrendous at the documentation of next steps. I know them in my head, and as I'm talking, I can see the clear path, but I step away and then I go, okay, now what do I have to do? And I love that the technology is taking care of that for me. And I just spoke at a conference and we were talking about kind of like I was saying, the onboarding and the messaging, and we were talking about backing up into the prospect experience. And I was talking about how important it is to continually follow up with a lead if they haven't yet signed, and you have to follow up. And I was mentioning a tool, like a Fathom note taker or Script or one of those that takes notes. And essentially the advisor I was chatting with was saying, yeah, I'd never even thought, like, after that big, how a lot of advisors have like a 1 hour, let's get to know you after the consult.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He's like, I just send a follow-up that says, hey, essentially, do you want, are you ready to sign up? I was like, imagine if you kind of played back what you heard in that meeting and kind of summarized from your notes. I was like, it can be done in minutes after a meeting with a tool like a note taker. So, and to hear you say, like, we can take that all the way through to putting tasks in, like follow up with client, having a workflow that says, okay, person finished this meeting. Now we know we have to follow up tomorrow, and then in 3 days, and then in 3 weeks. I imagine something like that comes into play.
Absolutely. And it becomes so powerful within your practice when you take these efficiencies and these tech tools and you leverage them according to your own service model, right? Not someone else's,
right,
but your own. Your ability to serve your clients at a very high level just continues to go up.
Oh, yeah.
Your ability to follow up on the things that are most important to your clients just continue to increase, and you start to really accelerate those wow moments. But in order for you to get there, you really have to do planning on the front end and understanding your client journey from A to Z so that you can then leverage the tech the way you need it to.
Oh, yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I think when you can align I call it the business development ecosystem, where we kind of overlay the client journey with marketing, sales, and client experience. And then, I kind of look at the communication flow across there, and I'm sort of adamant on, like, you must know each touch point along the way of kind of if you will, the slowest client, like the slowest journey of someone, like getting on the list, interacting, scheduling the consult, having the follow-up meeting, waiting and not responding. Like, what are all of the paths of communication? And I can, and a lot of times advisors will be on board with the concept. But then when we get down to how do I make sure that happens and happens consistently across the organization, that's a whole nother area where I imagine you plug right into that.
We do. And we'll have dynamic conversations around what you want to see happen, get everything documented, help the team understand how they can now build out workflows to support those processes, but then make sure the team feels comfortable and confident that they can handle whatever aspects of the service delivery they're responsible for, right? It's less winging it and more clarity around how you then need to show up for your clients, which then creates consistency across the board and helps people to be successful.
Right. And that all rolls up to the area where I often help, which is in consistent messaging and really reinforcing the brand at the highest level, right? So how do we flow that down all the way to the systems and technology to support? Because as you grow, you want to maintain the same brand tenets and messaging and talking points and all of those things that reinforce a client experience that's positive. So we absolutely want to have those, that sinking all the way down, so people are, engaged through technology, know how to use the tools available to them, understand their impact in the system. I think that's extremely important.
It makes such a difference. And I know advisors listening to this are probably wondering, how do I do this? How do I
Yeah.
actually start, building out some of these systems within your practice? And it's really understanding, what kind of business are you building? How do you want to show up? And then getting clarity around the pieces of the business that then need to be built out.
I love it, because I don't know about you, but when advisors come to me, the big question is, where do I focus first? And how do I prioritize my resources? Because I can't do everything at once, and I don't know where to start. And it's almost too big that I don't know how to break it down. That'll happen all the time when advisors come about business development. And I absolutely see that on the system side. It can almost be overwhelm of, there's so much. How do I make this palatable? And how do I even know the clear path forward?
Yes, absolutely.
So if an advisor is listening to this, no matter what stage, whether they're solo and they're just kind of thinking, oh, I need to start getting a process in place, or they're much larger and they're like, it's been chaos, please help us, we don't know where to go, we need some clarity. How does an advisor or an RIA leader get started if they're interested in kind of learning more about how you might help them?
Yeah. So if an advisory leader or team is interested in, how to get started, what I often recommend is doing an audit. And that's an audit across your operational infrastructure and really giving visibility to where the gaps are with recommendations. Anytime you're going through the change management process, it could take some time for you to get to that final end vision. But if you know what steps you need to take over the course of, a number of weeks or months, it makes the project that much more easier to digest. One of the biggest areas that I see with firms of all sizes is we want better workflows. And so we will often start there and get their client onboarding workflows documented. And then let's take a look at your CRM of choice and figure out how we can get that tool built out to support those workflows. Once that happens, which I consider a real core piece of the business, then other areas of the business can then be worked on in time. And the example that I was giving you earlier around the firm in Southern California, that was their major pain point, is they didn't have any workflows. So they had no visibility of client projects. The team didn't know what to do, and it was just utter chaos. So once we got that visibility around the service workflows, and then had a CRM specialist come in and actually build the workflows in Redtail, and then now the team is being trained, well, that has served a couple of different purposes for the current team. But what I didn't mention earlier is that they also wanted to hire a new client support professional. So before they were able to hire, I said, let's get this piece together. They were then able to hire a few months later. And guess what? The person's being trained now on the proper processes to support the client experience, which is going to make his journey as a new employee that much more enjoyable and hopefully aid in retention long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that for sure being useful on many fronts in terms of cost savings and revenue generation on both sides of getting those workflows in place, getting the training, getting the tools for the leader to be able to start things on the right foot there with this kind of version 2.0. Like, okay, we're coming in, we're going to get it right. You may not have gotten it right to date, but now we are, and we're going to get things together. So I know we could really go under the hood and take a look at many things, but we have to wrap up for today. I do like to ask every guest coming on here, because full advisor coaching is not only about how do we become successful, more successful as professionals, but also, how do we maintain a fulfilling life along the way. What fulfills you, Cameo, outside of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so what fulfills me is really the time that I spend with family and friends. My relationships are very important to me. And so whenever I have an opportunity to spend time with loved ones, whether that's family events or traveling or just having people over my house for dinner, I love doing that. And that's where I find a ton of fulfillment. And then it also gives me a chance to tap into what they're doing and figure out, how I can be a support to them.
Oh, that's great. Absolutely. That's a lot of fun. Wonderful. So I know you have some free resources available for advisors. Can you just share that information, and we'll put it in the show notes too, so advisors can reach out and sort of put their toe in the water and learn a bit more.
Absolutely. Well, I wouldn't be an operations strategist and fractional CEO if I didn't talk about workflow. We talked about that today. So the resource that I have available is workflow strategies and steps to amplify your revenue and to bring on those best fit clients. Individuals can also get access to my newsletter, where I share practical best practices and strategies around how to systematize your business and really get it to a place where you're happy and the business is doing what it's supposed to do.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And we'll have that link in the show notes so everyone can take a look and go there. And then how else can they reach out to you? What's your URL? Can we find you on LinkedIn?
Yes, happy to. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Cameo Roberson. My name is down there in the description, as well as you can find me on my website at atlasparkco.com. And I have a social media handle by the same, Atlas Park CO.
Oh, great. Okay, we'll have that in the show notes too. Exciting stuff. Bill, what'd you think?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you both on doing a podcast containing two words which automatically give everybody sort of a reflexive jerk, which is audit and process.
Yeah, good point.
And people tend to write off process until somebody makes a big mistake, not of their own making, but because the process is flawed. And then everybody thinks, we need to be paying attention to the process here. And of course, the way that they can avoid that, and I love this, Cameo, is the idea of an operations audit. Guys, let's sit down. Does everything work like it's supposed to work? Does it work in a way that we need it to work? And does it benefit everybody who's using it? So good podcast on two difficult words. So
yes.
Scary too.
They're scary. I was going to say scary words. I mean, just hire out folks. If you're anything like me, I don't want to tinker in the tech, as it were. So yes, I am not going there. I'm going to bring in the expert, because you don't want me. I'll cross wires and connect things that shouldn't go. And
and that's such a great point, because when you get in there and you start tinkering with the tech and you don't really understand the end to end and you want to automate an error and see how the energy in your office shifts, or clients start to reach out and they're like, what is this? Why did you send me this? Because you've automated something that doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, it's 100%. Yes. All right.
It is true.
Thanks, Cameo. I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you. It's great to talk with you.
Absolutely. It's great to be here and sharing with your audience.
It is great. And Kristin, for people who are listening to this podcast who might think that they would benefit we know how to get a hold of Cameo now, but how do they reach out to you to have a conversation with you?
Well, the best way is to go to fulladvisorcoaching.com. There is a button in the upper right corner that says request a call. You can pick a time and get on my calendar, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always dabbling around out there, talking to people. So if you haven't connected with me on LinkedIn, feel free to find me out there, just under Kristin Harad. And you can also follow Full Advisor Coaching there as well.
Yes, and I can attest to the fact that Kristin is very active on LinkedIn, so do look for her when you're on that platform. For those of you who are listening to this podcast today who were not subscribers, the other thing I would suggest you do is you just hit the follow button, become a subscriber. That way, every time Kristin drops a new episode of the podcast, you're automatically notified and you can give it a listen. You don't have to think about where you heard it or how often she drops the podcast. It's there and you can give it a listen. I would also ask that if you like this podcast, if it has information you find useful, share it with people. Please, word of mouth promotion is fantastic stuff, and we would really welcome it, as a matter of fact. So until next time, I am producer Bill, the guy in the background, if you will. And on behalf of Kristin and everybody at Full Advisor Coaching, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen today. And I will remind you that you can go out today and make today a great day or not. The choice is yours. Use it wisely. Until next time.